thank you both for coming on. Super excited to talk about Sapien. And, maybe just to kick things off, Jesse, I feel like you're very well known in the space. You've been around for a while. I think Variant is very well known. And we always do like people introduce their funds and their background, but like you're pretty prominent in the space. And I think we can maybe skip through some of that. But one of the things I'm curious about is, you were, I think part of maybe the origin team at A16Z is just maybe bringing us back to when you decided to start Variant, when you're like, okay, I'm going to set out on my own, what that process looked like, what inspired it. Like, were you like, hey, this isn't working here, I want to do something on my own, or like how that went down?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess the first thing I'll say is, I've been an entrepreneur my whole career, with the exception of my stint at A16Z, which was an aberration from the norm. So I first got into crypto as a founder. So I think that's the indirect answer to your question. Is I'm a founder first, and I got into crypto as a founder. That was through Media Chain, where, evident in the name of the startup, we were trying to put a different type of digital asset on chain, namely digital media assets. Today we call them NFTs. And that was back in 2014, before Ethereum launched, so too early. And that company got acquired by Spotify, led blockchain research there briefly. And that immediately afterward, I went to Andreessen Horowitz, and there, was involved with launching the first crypto fund. And after investing that first fund, which was really through probably the coldest, deepest bear market, 2018, 2019, put together this crypto startup school education program, which had the goal of getting more founders started in the space. That was a real bottleneck at that time. And it was sort of in tandem with that I conceived of starting Variant, which is an early stage fund dedicated to working with founders right as they get off the ground. So the crypto startup school education program and Variant shared that same goal. And Andreessen is a much bigger fund. They invest at every stage. And at Variant, we're very focused on early stage investing as a dedicated focus. So that was the primary motivation, was seeing that opportunity to just be out in front of a whole new generation of entrepreneurs right as they get off the ground. And then the last thing I'd say is, back in 2020, when I started Variant, early 2020, it was not widely understood that the primary or a major impact that blockchains can have is that they enable internet users to own things on the internet. Right, this framing that digital ownership is the big unlock was not a widely understood idea. Today, I think it's synonymous with Web3, and I like to think Variant had some part in helping to elucidate that understanding. In that our ownership economy thesis, I think, was very out in front of that framing of the opportunity for blockchains, and it was a very user focused framing of why the technology mattered.
Yeah, because if I recall correctly, like the original thesis for the fund, or a big part of it, was like the ownership economy and the emergence of that. What's maybe surprised you? Like, okay, this played out the way we expected it to, and then this has maybe not played out in the same way that we would have expected.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I would say that the rate of progress against the original ownership economy thesis has not been as fast as I thought it might be. And what do I mean by that? Specifically that I would say short-term speculation on these digital assets that you can own has crowded out a lot of the more interesting, more compelling to me, some product innovations around products that make ownership a keystone of the user experience. That's what the original Variant thesis posited, that ownership would become a keystone of new user experiences throughout the stack, from developer infrastructure, smart contract platforms, all the way up to end user applications. And we just haven't seen that progression all the way up to end user applications. We obviously have decentralized networks and a lot of infrastructure built out where ownership is core to the developer experience. We have less stuff built at the consumer layer where ownership is a keystone of the user experience. And if I had to, attribute why, I already named one thing, which is like speculation crowding out long-term, design around ownership. But the other thing, of course, is regulation, and just the lack of clarity on whether this is possible to do and how to do it. I think has really discouraged and in worst cases, tied entrepreneurs' hands in trying to run that experiment. So I'm very optimistic that in the next, 2 to 4 years, we get to finally run that experiment and validate the thesis.
Yeah, I mean, for us at Lattice, a big part that we got us excited about, at least the deep in space, was this idea that you could really, beyond speculation or just going on Coinbase and purchasing an asset, you could contribute to it in a meaningful way that like created this stickiness between you and the protocol. Like how many people were like, oh, the way I got into it maybe was, mining and originally. And there's just like this also like mental construct of you do some work and you feel like, oh, I really earned this in a
Yeah.
meaningful way versus maybe I just like bought something and it went up a lot in price. So yeah, we're definitely aligned there, but yeah, it's hard when you can buy a token, it can go up, 1,000x and not also be excited about that. Rowan, maybe turning to you, you've got an incredible background, co-creator of Base. I had some questions there, but maybe, because this might be the first time people are hearing from you, it'd be cool to get a little bit more of your backstory. Because maybe even goes, beyond that. Like I think you were at Polymath before that. So yeah, it'd be cool to hear more.
Happy to jump into a bit more. I think before I do that, I just want to add a little bit to what Jesse's talking about.
Okay.
I think, and I'm getting over a cold here, so you have to bear with the odd grunt and cough. But I think the thing for me that has also hindered progress towards this ownership economy is user experience. Like we have definitely been hindered by regulation for sure. And I think that's stopped a lot of people going all in and really like throwing intent behind creating products that are like fit for mass consumer use. But ultimately, it's only in the past kind of 6 to 12 months that the kind of moons have started to align, and we really actually have all of the tools that are needed to now take this technology and bring it to a much more broad audience. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. I think user experience is a really big part of the problem. And it's awesome to see a bunch of different companies really honing in on how do we get people on chain in the quickest, slickest, easiest, simplest way possible. And that's kind of a big part of what I actually did at my time in Coinbase. So just flipping back real quick, kind of had a career of two parts. Haven't always been an entrepreneur. First kind of decade of my career, I was actually an engineer and working my way up through from kind of mech eng to exec level and working in the energy industry for my sins. I'm originally from Scotland. And so that is by far the biggest industry there. And I hated it, is the bottom line. You mentioned, Mike, mining being a cool entrance to crypto, and that's exactly how I originally got in. A friend of mine told me about magical internet beans. I knew literally nothing about it, but he explained that I could build a machine, like one of my gaming rigs, point it towards a network and start helping to process stuff, but also to earn an income on the side. And that kind of perked my attention. I then quite quickly started reading up, got completely lost and fell down the rabbit hole. Absolutely loved being able to just permissionlessly rock up, build stuff, and start contributing. And so I got carried away. I filled my spare room, I filled my office, then I filled my garage. Over 2013 to 2016, it became significantly more profitable for me to run kind of consumer equipment at my home and in my garage than it was for me to do my day job. And so I took a chance and I kind of went all in. I bought a couple of warehouses in Scotland, filled them with kit, placed a couple of big scary orders from China, and spent 6 months building clean rooms and setting up a proper facility. And it was a ton of fun. But I got bored quite quickly, moving from very busy to essentially turn on, turn off occasionally, pushed me to do more. And so have been building in the crypto space ever since. A variety of different things from protocols through to DEX aggregation, charting tools, and then most recently at Coinbase, trying to help bring that company on chain and also bring their user base on chain. And the way that we ended up pushing to do that was to give Coinbase a home in the on chain economy. And that was Base. So I helped kind of bring Base to market with all the partnerships, a lot of the legal work in the background, a lot of the operations, and took a step back earlier this year for family reasons, which I won't go into. My plan was to take a year off, and it didn't quite work out that way. I got involved with Trevor and what he was building at Sapien, and I guess that's what led me to here today. Super excited
Yeah.
about bringing two of kind of the technologies that I enjoy kind of geeking up on the most together in a way that's genuinely net positive for everybody. So super excited to be building a huge network of AI trainers all around the world.
Yeah. And maybe like just before we get into Sapien, because it's rare we get to talk to one of the co-creators of Base on this podcast, like what, everyone maybe now thinks like foregone conclusion, Base was going to go be successful. But, at the time there were a lot of failures at Coinbase, like the NFT marketplace didn't go so well. Like there've been some other things. Like, what do you think beyond yourself being there, like really made Base be successful where there had been some other things that hadn't worked out as much?
I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point that Coinbase somewhat lost their way for a little while. They kind of hired very, very quickly in response to the market going wild and needing more people on seats. And they hired a bunch of kind of non-crypto people is the bottom line. And I would never say anything bad about Coinbase. It's one of the best groups of people, period. They have some incredible people building some incredible things, and they're working very hard on this UX issue to try and get to the point where we actually have tech that we can give to neighbors, parents, auntie, uncle, whoever. Um, but the short version, they somewhat lost their way. There was a huge number of non-crypto people, growing pains for any company scaling from kind of relatively modest numbers up to very large numbers quite quickly. It just meant that not all of the products that were being worked on were kind of fully in line with what the market wanted or needed or kind of enjoyed to use. And that was recognized at the exec level. The exec crew at Coinbase, which now includes Jesse P, are incredible, plain and simple. And they steered the ship back on track. They recognized that they needed significantly more crypto native, I hate the term, but for lack of a better phrase, people. And they empowered those of us who actually did get it and knew how to kind of build something the market wanted and kind of reduce complexity and get to the point where this is more scalable. And that's kind of the output. Base was definitely not any one person. I think Base would not have happened without Jesse P. Let me just say that first and foremost. The man is a one-man army. But the whole Base team have been incredible. Like we launched Base at the start with 9 or 10 people, tiny effort, huge impact, and it's scaled since then.
Yeah, it's been super impressive to watch, and definitely a real catalyst for the Ethereum ecosystem in the past year. Turning to Sapien now, because a lot of people probably aren't going to be familiar unless you guys don't have a token yet, which is one reason a lot of times people aren't familiar. But maybe just lay the groundwork. What is Sapien? What are you guys trying to build? And we'll start there.
Happy to. And so I think there's a little bit of context that's needed. AI models are accelerating very, very quickly and becoming significantly more sophisticated. And we're getting very close to this like AGI moment that people keep talking about. And arguably we're there already. Like a lot of the boxes that we would put in place to determine when a model was at human level reasoning and had kind of artificial general intelligence have been ticked. And the way that these models learn is by ingesting huge amounts of data. And the way that starts is by providing them with all of the data that's available publicly. So the open internet and a variety of other sources. That ship has sailed. AI models have long ingested the open internet. And now, really, the way the puck is going is helping these models better understand what they're seeing. Initially, in the early days, for things like data labeling and annotation, that would have been simple things like draw a bounding box around the AirPods. And that was useful for a period of time. But now computer vision has caught up, and these types of tasks are no longer valuable. The way we see the puck moving is that models are going to need increasingly sophisticated kind of expert feedback in order for them to become truly useful in lots of different areas of our daily lives. And one example here, Jesse, for example, has been in the entrepreneurial world for a long time and has been helping companies grow for a long time, investing in seed and early stage. And so he has this wealth of knowledge. And if he goes into ChatGPT or Claude 3.5 or one of these things and asks a question about his area of expertise, he's going to get an answer that's like pretty good, but it's not going to be great. And our core thesis for why it's not great is that we haven't figured out yet how to incentivize people like Jesse to essentially provide their expertise, their nuanced understanding of the world to these models to help them better understand and go deep in lots of different areas. And so the short version, without me rambling, is that we're building open protocol for AI training data. And our aim is to connect any enterprise business or AI agent or company that's building a model with the experts that they need and the people that they need to help hone and provide the data for that model to train on.
Got it. So maybe that's the high level from a product perspective, because I think there's a lot of mechanics to this that's pretty critical to the go-to-market and how you differentiate versus some of the other peers in this space. What does the user experience look like for contributors, the new owners of the network?
Before you answer this, can I just tee you up? Like, because I think I can now you here. Because earlier I was saying, products that make ownership a keystone of the user experience, right? That's what we've been lacking. I think this question about the product is great because Sapiens is one of the best examples running that's doing this. Sorry, Rowan, I'll let you explain why that is, but that's my framing.
Love it. Thank you. I think tiny bit of context first. The existing ways that this happens is typically quite centralized. You're building a model, you need data, or you have an existing data set, you need it structured. You head out to one of many companies who do an awesome job, and they will subcontract that data out to a large warehouse of people, typically in the developing world, Philippines, Bangladesh, Africa, places like this. And they will work on your data and they will annotate, label, create whatever's needed, structure it, and send it back to you. That's kind of how things have traditionally been done. Our core thesis here is that there is a significantly better way to do this for lots of different reasons. And we can take this in different angles. But ultimately, we shouldn't have some of the world's most sophisticated technology powered by very small groups of people in different regions around the world, because that's going to create a ton of different problems around biases and things like that before we even get into like ethics and anything along those lines. And so our thesis is, rather than building a centralized model, it's 2025. We have the technology to do this differently. We have the technology to empower anyone, anywhere to lean in and actively contribute in somewhat of a new gig economy. And there's a couple of key things that need to happen for this to work. And ownership forms like a cornerstone of making this system work. The first key thing that we need to figure out is, how do we maintain quality when we're in a decentralized environment? If you imagine giant warehouse full of people, call center style, very easy to maintain quality. You can have a suite of managers who are walking around watching. Let somebody pick up their phone and do this on the bus, do this in between Uber trips. It becomes a very different thing. And so we are ensuring that incentives are aligned, first and foremost. I'll talk about that more in a second, to drive better quality. But the key piece is that we're having people own their reputation, and we're having people build reputation in the system before they get access to more sophisticated tasks. So anyone, anywhere can rock up, they can lean in, they can start contributing, they can start earning. But they need to build that reputation, they need to kind of prove to us that they're capable before they get access to the more sophisticated work. The incentive piece is really important, and this was kind of the major unlock that enabled this to actually work in the first place. We were struggling to kind of get towards the levels of quality that are needed for AI models before this kind of implementation, and realized that we were trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, we already know how to align incentives in a decentralized network. Like, there are many networks that do this every single day for hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets. And so think of Ethereum proof of stake, call it proof of quality, rip out the consensus on the back end and use a QA QC process instead. And you've got essentially what we're building here for Sapien. And what that means is that users come in, they stake tokens, essentially betting, providing collateral on their future work. And if they do good work, if they behave well, just like in Ethereum, they're receiving extra rewards. They're high value to us, they're high value to our customers. And conversely, if they do bad work, if they provide bad data, if they cheat, whatever the case may be, then their stake will be slashed. And those kind of two concepts form kind of two of the four pillars, if you like, that make the system work. reputation and incentive alignments.
From a reputational perspective, who is the judge of the contributions? Like, is it other contributors, or do you have to match with those contributors to kind of determine the accuracy of your contributions? Like, how do you guys measure if someone's a good contributor or not?
It depends on the data set. So I don't want to give you a really long answer, but the short answer here is that we have a mixture of kind of automated checks and then the more reputable users doing QA/QC on the less reputable users. And so it's like concentric circles of trust with a pretty healthy dose of automation to try and make this scale.
Maybe just to kind of broaden the scope of AI and crypto, obviously there's a ton of interest in the convergence of those two sectors. I feel like last year it was about sort of enterprise AI. You had things like BitTensor, all the decentralized compute networks, maybe some data plays. Now it's really this more like retail meta of like speculation. When you look at the stack of infrastructure for AI, what do you think is the furthest along, like in actually from a commercialization perspective? Like maybe it's something like you guys in the data labeling side, but like what's working right now? And what would you need to depend on? Because there's so many teams coming out with like new infrastructure, and it's like questionable how much of that infrastructure is going to be needed.
I think we don't know yet is the short answer. Like we're in infancy. But for me, we've clearly got product market fit. It's growing
Yeah.
at a crazy speed, and demand is very hard to satiate today. I think the original problem was like, we don't have enough compute. So buy as many GPUs as you possibly can, throw it at the problem, great. Once you've got as many GPUs as you can possibly grab, it comes down to like algorithm. How do we optimize the compute that we have? And then once you've got your algorithm nailed and you've got your GPUs, the only thing that makes a difference, really, if we're being kind of straight to the point here, is quality of data. And so for me, it's one of these kind of in the background things that needs to happen for AI to become useful. It's not something that people think about when they're typically using ChatGPT or Claude 3.5, but it's one of the most important parts of the puzzle. And it's something that we're actively seeing some of the biggest companies in the world wake up to and start to seriously invest in.
Got it. Maybe going back to you, Jesse, as far as the AI space, it's pretty clear Sapien fits into the ownership economy thesis for Variant, and these contributors being able to own the network, kind of govern the network. How does this also fit into like how you guys are thinking about AI and the other investments maybe you guys have made, and like maybe even just bring us back to like how you even discovered Sapien?
So yeah, maybe I'll start with the second part. How did I discover Sapien? So yeah, Rowan and Trevor have been in the crypto space for a long time. I think I first met Trevor somewhere in like early Ethereum days, and so he's been on my radar. And I guess we reconnected upon him starting Sapiens. I think in part because he recognized the alignment with their approach and our thesis, and so that was the rekindling of a old relationship. In terms of how we've been investing in the AI space, in addition to Sapien, we've made a number of other investments. So, you mentioned there's this stack, and you're questioning, what's useful. And I think you can basically break down the stack as follows. Like I actually have this sketch in front of me from a team discussion that we were having recently, where it's basically like, at the base of the stack, there's compute, right? And I'm talking about user-owned networks here, the stack of user-owned networks interfacing with AI. So there's compute, right? And we made one investment there in Hyperbolic, which is building a decentralized GPU marketplace. And on top of that, they do inference. And then there's data, which is where Sapiens fits in. You need the compute, then you need the data. So Sapiens fits in the data layer. Then on top, both data and computer inputs to models. There's a number of teams now working on, decentralized training and building foundation models in a distributed way. That just a year ago, I think that was widely thought to be impossible. It's now empirically proven that it is possible, and the rate of improvement in that space is really exciting. We've made one investment there that's not yet announced. The basic idea there is imagine the users contributing to training models like OpenAI or Perplexity, that they owned a piece of those models and got to benefit from their commercial success. So that's the layer up the stack from compute data models. And now I think what we're starting to see is this explosion of consumer facing stuff. The foundation models can be wrapped as, with a chat interface. We're seeing agents, that build on top of these models and our social media influencers. And so, there's all manner of different apps getting built on top of the foundation models. And there's a lot of dev tooling also getting built out to support those consumer applications. And as Rowan said, I think we're in the really early innings of specifically that layer in the stack. And especially in the on-chain world, we haven't really we've seen a lot of slop is the word that people are throwing around. We've seen a lot of agents, AI agents, putting out a lot of slop on social media. We've seen far less real on-chain economic activity, but I'm really optimistic that we're going to see some pretty cool things happen over the next year or two. And my framing for this as to why this is interesting, why the app layer is interesting, rests on Vitalik's original definition of DAO going back to 2014, where he first defined DAO as decentralized autonomous organization. And the key there, and this is a quote from him, is the A in DAO stands for automaton. And in DAOs, you want the automaton at the center and the human at the edges. And so what's really exciting to me at the application layer is we may start to see agents that are really specialized and capable be at the center of these organizations where you have humans at the edges contributing on the margins with a little bit of governance, a little bit of nudging, maybe a little bit of capital, but where the agent at the center is really autonomous. And so that's exciting. I'll park it there. That's my rough overview of the stack, where Sapiens fits in, where else we've been investing.
In advance of this call, I was doing some research on your Twitter feed, and I'd say more so than most investors, that's DAOs is something that clearly you still have a keen interest in, and it had fallen out of favor for a little while, but I hadn't heard anyone talk about this idea of the autonomous component really being what had been frankly lacking, and some of these unlocks actually maybe starting to allow for DAOs to realize realize their potential. Yeah,
and to be clear, I think we're we're still kind of there's a big gap that we have to cross before we're there. Like many other folks in the space, I think the version of DAOs that we got in 2020, 2021, I'd say was largely unsuccessful. And the reason is that the humans were at the center, and DAOs did not do a lot to scale human decision making. Corporations are the best way to do that. We've learned that through millenniums of iterating on the best organization structures. And so DAOs didn't really bring anything new to the table for humans. But I think if we add in, or really emphasize the autonomous component at the center of DAOs, then we start to get something really interesting at the nexus of, humans at the edges owning a piece of the automaton at the center and governing what it does. So that's what I'm excited about. In order to get there, everything that's below in the stack I just outlined, including, the data, including the models, needs to get built out. So yeah, I guess all that is to say we're investing across the full stack: compute, data, models, dev tools, and applications. And I am very excited about where it goes, despite not, being super enthralled about what's going on right at this moment at the agent layer. We haven't made any investments in agents, for example, right now, because they're not yet coordinating a ton of economic activity on chain. That's fundamentally interesting.
This was a very successful fundraising round, $10.5 million seed round that you all announced in November. Rowan, as part of that fundraising process, and whether it was Variant or broadly with other investors that you guys talked with, what do you think the most challenging aspect of getting people over the line, excited about it? Where did you feel like you were running into some roadblocks where the vision didn't always align with folks?
I don't think it was about a kind of misalignment of vision. I think it's more that the space is evolving very, very quickly. And our own vision, very candidly, has been evolving quite quickly. And where we started in a kind of decentralized scale AI type model versus where we're going in a very open, kind of permissionless protocol are two very different things. And for us, like we're going in the right direction at this stage. We're tackling something much broader and much more future proofed. And I think talking about agents in particular is super interesting to me because it's probably one of the most exciting things in my view that's happening. And I'm totally with Jesse. Like the slop that we're seeing around specifically social agents is like great. Like we know that we can do this quite simply. We've got tons of content being posted. Well done. However, there are some really cool green shoots of growth and companies building AI agents in ways that will fix things like UX. So you can just provide your agent with some subset of access to your assets. And then rather than figuring out how to do a hop and a skip and a jump between 5 different chains and compound and leverage on some particular DeFi position, you just say, hey, go and sort this for me, take from here, put here, aim for this in this risk confine, and away they go. And so I think things like that are super exciting to me. And we're very acutely aware that that's the direction that we're going. And so we need to be building a protocol that has that type of end goal in mind. It's quite likely that our customers today, the Alibabas, the Midjourneys of the world, are going to be very different to our customers of tomorrow. And there's a non-zero chance that these customers of tomorrow could well be just agents themselves, coming to us, hunting for data to help them develop and become more suitable or more capable of delivering whatever objective they've been set out to do. And so that was a very long, weird way to connect it back, but protocol first is clearly the right way to build this out.
The client roster for Sapien, super impressive. A lot of big companies. When you're going in to sell them, you're like, hey, we've got this crypto network. We're going to have tokens at some point of time. Obviously, they don't need to worry about it, but like, is that something you even get into, or like you abstract all of that away? They don't even think about the token business eventually, or do you have to have that conversation when you're in the sales process?
We typically don't. I mean, we don't hide it by any means, but at the end of the day, they have a need for data. We can provide data. We can make sure it's of very good quality. And that's ultimately the only thing that matters. We're starting to have more conversations now. I actually had a really fun conversation earlier with a company building in the autonomous driving space. And they were super excited about the fact that we have a pretty large network of people already, even at this stage, 150 odd thousand across 110 countries. Because when you're building autonomous vehicles, you can't just do all of your data gathering in like SF. Like, great, now your car can drive around SF. What happens when you head to a different state? What happens when the road laws are different or the traffic signs look different? And so it's starting to become much more part of the conversation, but typically we're not pitching as we're a crypto project, we're building a network. It's much more, you need data, we have access, let's make it work.
Do you think anyone's doing that well now? Like just in terms of like companies that you model yourself after, where you're selling into traditional businesses and not, most like B2B and crypto is like really just selling into other crypto companies. That you could borrow playbook from?
I haven't seen a good playbook, to be totally honest. And I think the reality of the situation is that we may have been building this stuff for a decade in crypto land, but the vast majority of big business doesn't want to hear about it. They don't want to take risk in any way, shape, or form. They don't want to take balance sheet volatility. They just want a product. And if the product is good and fit for purpose, they're in. And so we try not to kind of create complexity. We try and get out of our own way. But there are certain customers that genuinely love this stuff and are excited about hearing about it. It's not the norm, though.
Yeah.
Can I add to this? So I think Rowan nailed it. Like, at the end of the day, you got to just build a product people want, right? And so whether the customer is a big, large enterprise customer or consumer, like at the end of the day, the product has to just do a job for the user, and they don't really care. Usually, the customer really doesn't care how you're doing the job, right? So crypto has got to be, it is an implementation detail. It's just how you do the job. And our view is, the role of crypto and Sapien and a lot of other marketplaces like it is to just build the marketplace, build the network effect bigger, faster. higher quality, build a better product, essentially. But critically, the incentives are facing the supply side of the network, not the demand side. The demand side doesn't need to worry about how the job is getting done, right? Um, so I think that's an for folks who this may be news to you. It's an important insight that really crypto should be thought of as an implementation detail towards solving user problems. It is not necessarily the thing that people want. The product is what people want.
I couldn't agree more. And there's a kind of fun analogy that I used to use a bunch, and it's kind of adjacent here. But imagine clicking on a website and then a pop-up appears saying, "Would you like to run this with like GCP or AWS?" It's like that kind of detail of like the user doesn't care. They don't care if the app is running in this network or that network. They care if the app works and it suits their need. And so we need to, in crypto land, like talk about the tech where it matters, but just talk about product everywhere else. That's the key thing that's going to change people's lives and make them care. They certainly won't care if we explain to them how the Swift system works. And I expect the same is true of crypto.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get to that point in crypto. Once you start not hearing people talking about like where is the app actually deployed, and people having allegiances for their chain of choice. And it's tough though, because like if people have bags, they want the apps to be where their bags are. They presume those will go up much more in value. We've the system is designed in that way, sort of work to make that sense. But like, I do agree that for enterprise use cases, especially like traditional companies, it's pretty wild that they would want to get into those implementation details. Maybe just kind of wrap things up. Obviously, the token isn't live yet. You guys still are in the earliest stages, but like, walk us through the next 12 months. What can people expect? How do other people get involved? How do you guys bring this protocol further to market?
Would love to. So we're going through an evolution. We kind of are in semi-closed product mode, if you like, where a big chunk of the system is kind of invite only. And we're evolving towards open protocol. And there's kind of four big pieces of the puzzle that need to be matured, or in some cases created, in order to make that happen. The first piece is our QA/QC. It's existing today. We need to significantly ramp up and make it much more scalable to get to the kind of numbers we want to get to. And QA/QC is obviously a cornerstone. None of this works if the data is not high quality, and it will feed user reputation, which we talked about earlier. We're in the kind of early implementation of user reputation. That's something that will be on-chain and owned by the users, and something that they can take with them to whatever other on-chain environment they're in. And I think that's really important because it's somewhere that's kind of pretty heavily underinvested in crypto land. We need to get towards under-collateralized loans and things like this, and reputation forms a big part of that puzzle. Reputation then kind of feeds into a qualification system, which we're building. And this is a way of screening at a task level the users that come in to make sure that somebody has the right expertise. For example, we recently had a job where we were sourcing oncologists to screen radiology images. And clearly, we can't give that to everybody. We need to know this person is like a board certified oncologist with the right expertise for this particular task. And so a qualification screening is going to be kind of non-sexy things like NDAs for cases where the data is proprietary or sensitive in some way, but also screening and onboarding. And then the last piece of the puzzle, once we have inbound data, either from other data providers or enterprise customers, and we have a decent network of users, and we have reputation and qualification, the most important thing is matching and intelligently matching the right users with the right customers. And so that's the kind of fourth piece of the puzzle that we're building out actually in the next kind of couple of quarters.
The point on incentivizing someone like an oncologist to take time out of their evening to do this work, like, do you think it's a pure dollars and cents thing, or like, do you think like Quora back in the day, there's an element of people being able to signal in certain capacities their reputation on Sapien?
I think it's definitely both. I don't think that's an or. I think different people have different motivations. These types of activities are actually very, very well paid. So money is clearly usually a motive for most people. But being able to kind of say, I helped build this is something that's extremely powerful and something that people actively want to be a part of.
And I would just add my 2 cents on this, because when you take those two things, money and then being a part of something, actually ownership is a great way to manifest those. So it's like the being a part of something bit, it can be both intrinsically motivated. It can also be there can also be an extrinsic part of that, where it's like, hey, I want to be part of this thing because I think it has potential to have a lot of impact and I can benefit from the upside. So yeah, I think that's a perfect elucidation of like why is the ownership approach kind of an interesting one here. It's because it merges these two things. It's both economic value, but also the perspective upside of being able to contribute to something that you care about.
Jesse, you just heard Rowan kind of walk through maybe some of the product roadmap and how they're developing, but you're pretty famous for the progressive decentralization playbook from 4 years ago. How do you think, like, with the Trump administration, maybe shifts in regulatory environment, like, do you update that? Is it a better fit now? Like, when you advise teams, are you like, this is how I think about it today versus maybe then?
Monday at our team meeting, we were talking about exactly this. So I have a bunch of thoughts here. I guess what I would say is, so first of all, I think progressive decentralization still holds and is still a valid approach for a lot of projects. And just to summarize what it is you start by building a product people want. You invite the community to participate in the product, and then once you found product market fit and people are using it, you have a strong community. Then you effectuate a distribution of ownership to those community members, usually via an airdrop or some kind of incentive program. So I still think that is probably the dominant way to go about building a product in crypto, because if it's done right, it allows you to really validate, do I have product market fit, before you go and get a token out there, which can, make it more noisy, twist incentives and obfuscate real product market fit. So that's the key. I think the key insight behind why progressive decentralization works is it allows you to get product market fit first, and then use the ownership incentive as a way to grow that product bigger, faster. Now, in the last couple of years, infrastructure has gotten much, much better. This is Rowan rightly added this to our opening remarks, right? And it's made it such that that launching a token is now extremely easy and extremely cheap for anyone to do. And so today, with the presence of token launchers like Pump Fun and in the agent space, things like virtuals, you're just seeing a deluge of tokens being launched. I think the stat is like in the last year, the number of new tokens being launched is 20 times higher than the year before. So what's interesting about that is, these are projects that are starting token first. They're not doing the progressive decentralization thing. They're starting token first. And so my kind of pet term for this approach is progressive utility. And it's actually the opposite of progressive decentralization, right? What's happening is people are launching tokens and then figuring out, what do I do next? What product do I build? I want to note, I think this is a viable strategy too. I think it's a lot harder, and it takes a certain type of entrepreneur to do this, because it is very noisy from day one to invite a bunch of speculators into your project before you've built anything. So to summarize, progressive decentralization, progressive utility, both viable in 2025, both challenging. Progressive decentralization, probably a little bit less challenging, and a little bit more traditional in that it focuses on product first.
All right. Well, you guys heard it here first. Progressive utility. Maybe we'll
gotta write the piece now.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be expecting it. Guys, thanks so much for joining. For people to follow you, what's the best way? We'll put it in the show notes, but just so people that are listening now can hear.
I'm on Twitter and Farcaster, at Jesse on Farcaster, at Jesse WLDN on Twitter.
And Snap at Rowan on Farcaster and at Rowan RK6 on Twitter. And then what we'd really love is for folks to jump in, follow at Play Sapien. A big part of what we're building is a kind of interface that makes this a little bit more fun. We didn't really talk about that today. But hopefully it's something that, even if you aren't interested in helping AI learn, maybe you can have some fun by kind of playing the interface regardless.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. We'll put it all in there, and we'll see you soon.